Hello, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Adebisi. I'm from Nigeria, just so you know. I'm the founder of Icon of Change Initiatives. Today, I have amazing panel here. We'll be discussing STEM, how to use STEM to bridge the gap and have more equal education. So, let me go and explain what STEM means. STEM is an acronym for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And in order for us to have an equitable education and be able to sustain it, STEM is very important in unlocking critical thinking, problem solving, and knowledge to tackle global challenges. Today with me, I have Mr. Hukazu. Mr. Hukazu is the founder of Global Empowerment and Monitoring Initiatives, an outstanding book author and trainer that has featured in many print publications, including New York Times. Mr. Hukazu, can you let our audience know you better?
Thank you so much. I don't know what you know about me, but I'm just Mr. Herokazo, and everything is secondary. So I'm the founder of Global Empowerment and Mentoring Initiative. My company is focused on helping the youths to discover who they are because a lot of times many youths don't know who they are. Thank you.
You're welcome. Next to Mr. Okazu is Miss Sarah. How are you? You look so pretty. Your smile is so intoxicating.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. I'm Liza. I'm training to be the first Brazilian woman in space, and I'm a NASA scientist now. And my goal is to create technologies that can now reach the moon and Mars, and also to share opportunities to youth to connect with NASA opportunities.
Oh, that is great. Thank you so much for
Thank
making
you.
it here. Miss Sarah, how are you?
I'm great. How you doing?
I'm doing very well. I read about you that you are such a good childhood educator. So can you let our audience know more about you?
Of course. My name is Sarah Pillars. I've been working as a preschool teacher for the past 5 years. My goal is to teach young children the power of education and also to teach them what they can, that the sky is not the limit. No matter how young they are, they can still make a difference in the world.
Thank you so much, Miss Sarah. So right beside me is Mr. Hector. Mr. Hector is a systematic theologist. He's also an author that has participated in many researches in order to improve the life of youth. Mr. Hector, can you let our audience see you?
Sure. Yes. Aside from my background in theology, I'm a licensed clinical social worker. So my area of interest has been always with working with youth, especially with issues of mental health. I've spent many years working with youth, especially those who've been identified as gang involved and have been at risk for either dropping out, being kicked out of school, etc.
Thank you so much. So, if you're just joining us online, my name once again is Elizabeth at DBC. We're looking at the topic STEM, empowering the future, building bridging science, sustainability, and equitable education, SDG 4. So, let me start my question from Mr. Okazo. So, my question is that how can STEM education help achieve sustainable developmental goals of providing equality for all? I mean, I'm asking this based on your experience as an author, and you've dealt with youth. You have so many training and facilitations for youth. Can you please let's have your view on this?
There's no doubt that STEM has come to stay, and that is the way forward. But the issue I think we need to focus more is how can STEM be sustainable? For it to be sustainable, it needs to have what I call equal opportunity for all, and that entails having distribution all and sundry. For instance, right here in the US, we have science and technology and innovation working very well. But if you look at some emerging countries like in Africa, and developing countries, you will discover that they don't have these equal opportunities. So for it to be sustainable, we must make sure that all these countries have that equal access that they need to make sure that they have even distribution. Because you can compete favorably very well with those in the US if you don't have lights, if you don't have computers, if you can't even do your research very well, how can you compete? So I think the focus should be how can these emerging countries or developing countries develop themselves because the competition is literally low on that area. So for them to be sustainable, the government has to come into place and the private sector. bring in policies and implement them in such a way that there will be even distribution. Thank you.
That is wonderful. Based on what you said the governments have to, invest more. Let's talk about industries. What would be their role if we have to put everything on government? What would be the role of individual, the role of industries? What will be their role in fostering more STEM education in order to have equal access education, at least to fulfill the SDG 4?
Okay, that's important again. The private sector partnership is very, very important. And how does that play out? Now, there's something we call corporate social responsibility, CSR. If any company, for instance, you have a bank or all your companies are in any particular locality, now CSR is very important. You have to give back to society. Now, they could give grants, they could give scholarships, they could give employment opportunities. You could support programs that can help those kind of activities that you want them to really break into reality. So those things are very, very important. It's not about having those policies, but implementation. Because it's one thing for government to say we need this, but then how do you implement this? So that is why private-public partnership is very important. So the private sectors on their part can fund most of these programs, and I think that will help them to put them at par with their contemporaries. Thank you.
You're welcome. And to all people, to everyone watching us online, just in case you're just joining, we're discussing STEM, empowering the future and bridging science, sustainability, and equitable education, SDG 4. On my right here, I have Sarah. So Sarah, as a childhood educator, can you please let our audience know how can STEM foster critical thinking and problem solving skill that is necessary to addressing sustainable global change?
Of course. So, what I like to implement in my classroom with all my young children is that first and foremost, I like to tell them that I am your guide in life. What that means is that when you enter my classroom, I am only there to guide you. I need you to think for yourself. I need you to fend for yourself. And of course, I have students who ask me, well, then why are you here? You're a teacher. What do you mean I have to do things for myself? I'm like, well, in the real world, is that when you grow up and you take your stand in the world, you need to understand the importance of doing the work yourself. It starts with you. It doesn't start with your parents. It doesn't start with the next person, your neighbors or your siblings. It starts with you. You first foremost must learn how to stand for yourself, how to fend for yourself first before you can help anybody else. So another thing also I like to do is implement the different cultures background in my classroom. So what I like to do is that a lot of people think that, because they're young children, they are incapable of learning what's going on outside of the world. So being that my classroom have a lot of people that come from different backgrounds, what I like to do is get the parents involved in my classroom as well, to teach the children about the different backgrounds and what they can do as far as when it comes to critical thinkings, what they can do to help those those who are outside of the classroom who doesn't have the benefits that they do.
So because when I went through your profile, I see a lot of innovations that you're bringing into the childhood education, a lot of innovations that are coming from you. This question that I'm about to ask you is a little personal to me and to what you're doing. For instance, I think about last month in what we do at Icon of Change, just basically helping women to have better life, to have sustainable, to be able to sustain themselves. So it just got to my core that there's these two girls that walked almost 4 hours to our office just to come and tell us that they came to plead to us that if we can just get them a library, it's something they want to be able to read like every other child, and they have little to no access to education actually. So they walked all the way to my office just to express themselves. Sometimes when I watch this video, it makes me just emotional. Like, okay, I know it's bad, but I didn't know it's so bad for somebody to walk that far to just get their point of view. As a childhood educator and as someone that have had so much innovations, how do you think we can bridge this gap between these children in these underdeveloped communities and bridge this gap in such a way that it's going to be STEM would not just be only taught, but it will be accessible to everyone.
Agreed. So what I like to do with my student is that I do book drive. I also do so every school year, instead of asking donation for what they need, I ask donation for what other students in the community that their parents cannot afford their supplies for the school year. And I ask the student to bring in whatever they're not using at home, they're bringing to the school. And what we do is we go into like a neighborhood field trip and we drop off those little supplies at school. Again, they're 4 and 5 years old. So a lot of people are thinking, well, to them, this is just fun. They're not getting any lessons from it. But they actually are, because what they're learning is that there are people who are less fortunate than they are. And they're learning the importance of giving back to the community at a young age.
Wow. Thank you so much. That's so important. And I really appreciate what you said, that we got to catch them young. We have to teach them as young, even though it seems so insignificant, but whatever we teach these children, it stick with them. And probably they can use it in future to make more difference around the world. Thank you so much, Miss Sarah. So, to my friend, how are you, Laser?
I'm good.
Well, just to let you guys know that Laser has this foundation. It's called Equitable, right? Did I pronounce it right? Good. It's a social platform that provides quality education, quality STEM education for children around the world. And when I read through it, I went to the website. I was wowed because it seems so nice, and it's something that is fun to play around with, and before you know it, you're learning. Even though you're having fun, probably playing a game or doing this, you're still learning. So I have this question for you. How can we encourage more girls around the world to take up STEM related subjects? And just like you are NASA, things that naturally a woman will not dream of doing. And seeing you do it, I'm so wowed by it. So can you please tell our audience, and let's see how best we can use this opportunity to encourage girls to do more.
Yes, thank you for your question. So I remember that for me, it was really hard to see me as a scientist when I was a child because I had no references. In the science books of school, I couldn't find any woman, telling her stories. So in high school, I discovered a project that I could collaborate with Harvard into translating some astronomical data from scientists, from women who worked there, and was really special because I think that the world, forgot them for a long period. And it was really special to get to know their stories, and that was the moment that I started to see myself as a scientist too. So through my my platform, the Live Foundation, I want to share these stories, to share some amazing stories from women like Anna Jump Cannon, who has classified the most who has classified more than all the stars that we know. Basically, it was her, and we don't know it. So through my website, I share these stories and also opportunities, girls and also boys around the world to have access to STEM courses, free STEM courses. I think it's really important to provide this content, through technology. So I think we can inspire a lot of girls and students around the world from different backgrounds through technology.
Wow, that is so amazing. I know we're doing so much through technology, but sometimes I cannot just but wonder what happened to children or girls that are in a very remote village and don't have access to these things. How do we, make all this information accessible to them? Can you please share your insight on how can we make all this? Like I went to your website, and truth be told, I was wowed. But the question is, for a child that don't have internet, they don't even have a phone. Not to even talk of internet. Let's get there. So for a child that don't have a phone, not to talk of internet, how do we get this information to their doorstep?
So I think it's really important to have international collaboration to share, some books and other materials for them, because I think it's crucial to have access to information. So I think it's something that we need to pay attention to provide materials for them, to study more about the topics they are excited about. So imagine being interested in to astronomy but not having any books or access to internet, as you said. So I think it's really important to collaborate, like with some organizations, as Lipka and others, to provide books and other materials. So that's one of my future goals that I'm working on, to provide physical materials too, like to share an introduction of astronomy and other interesting topics, because I think it's a way to show this children who doesn't have access to internet that they matter too, and they also can become scientists one day. So I think it's really important to have this collaboration to share knowledge everywhere in the world.
Thank you so much. So, dear audience, if you're watching online and our beautiful audience looking at me here, I just want to bring you back to the topic we're talking about. We're talking about STEM and how we can use it to foster equitable education, working towards the SDG 4. Back to my story. I was talking about these two girls that had to walk to the icon office just to tell us that what can we do for them, right? And that brought us to our current project that we're currently working on. We're currently working on having a free library. At least it's going to be the first library probably in the whole town. It's going to be the first free library, and we're trying to inculcate, high city free computer, just these people having access to basic information. They wanted to do more, but they don't have the access. And now that you said it's something that you're working in, you're looking forward to doing in the future, I think it would be great if you can, put it as part of the plan. However, this will take me to my next question and to my next guest. How are you, sir?
Fine, thank you.
So, based on your profile, I see that you are a systematic theologist and you've done so much in encouraging the youth, both the LGBTQ youth, both the youth that have no vision, pointing them towards the right direction in California, if I'm not mistaken. Your work actually speaks for itself based on what you've done. And this brings me to this question. I want to know, like, how can we inspire more people to, to take more STEM related courses in order to, to better their community, to improve their critical thinking. If we have, because I saw that you work with a lot of gang related stuff. So if we have these people that have this much passion for gang stuff, for this, for that, I think we can direct or we can shift their focus into doing something positive to the environment. How can we do that?
So it's an interesting point you bring up, because you could put a lot of money into a program, right? But unless people see a purpose behind it, right, then it doesn't mean anything. And then they have to have hope. In other words, meaning that, as we know, STEM is difficult, right? You could ask any child about math. That's the one subject they'll probably try to avoid, right? Because it's hard. So they're more likely to give up, right? Unless they see a purpose behind what they're doing. Why a lot of people probably don't take calculus, because I'm never going to use it. Although we know it's very important, even just kind of your inner workings, right? So how do we reach out to people to see a point behind that, which is relevant? The reason I got into education actually goes back to when I was about 16 years old. I was in my home and I was doing math. And in my neighborhood where I grew up, I'm actually the only one of my friends who actually graduated from high school. And by the time I graduated, I had two of my friends that had already been murdered. One of my friends came to my door and just kind of wanted to hang out. He was much older. He was actually an adult, but hung out with us. Wanted to see what we were doing. I said, I'm working on some math right now. And he told me, you know what, math, I've always been dumb at. I've never gotten it. He had been kicked out of 2 different schools, had never finished continuation in high school. And I said, well, let's see what you could do. And I knew he was bright. So we sat there for a little while and I showed him a little bit. It was basic algebra. We did a little bit. He was so excited that he got it. Here you have a person, I think he was at the time about 19 years old. He said, do you mind if I take this book home because I want to show my mother that I could do this? You know, and that's something I never, ever forgot. I'm trying not to get emotional. So I never, ever forgot. And so when I work with students at high school level, but even now at graduate level, I see them in that, right? That the insecurity, that I don't see the purpose behind this, right? And I try to instill upon them that there is purpose, right? They can do this. That particular friend of mine actually died, was murdered not too long after. So he's never able to fulfill his potential as I saw it, right? So in my mental health work, I try to make sure that that's the goal, that children, right? And what makes a difference? If you were to ask any child that's successful, I could probably go around even the room and ask you, what made you successful? What brought you here? Everyone here could say that there was at least one person in their life who made a difference. One person they believed in, one person that believed in them, and one person that told them that they mattered. There's children out there that believe to this day, and there are adults that believe that they do not matter, that they're irrelevant. So it doesn't really, so why would I invest my time and energy in something that's difficult? Because it doesn't matter, right? You ask children, what do you want to be when you grow up? You know what they'll say? And I've run groups. They'll say, I want to be a football, NFL player. I want to be a basketball player. The odds of them going pro from high school is about 0.021. Yet they see that more probable than them going on to education. For them, higher education is as relevant or as likely as them being struck by lightning or winning the lottery. So how are we engaging communities? How are we engaging families? How are we bringing children who have been lost and been pushed out of the system back into the system?
Wow. That is some interesting fact. And for a fact, this is something that, in this technology hate that we have, in this social media hate that we have right now, it's hard for you to focus. And when I said focus, this is what I mean. A lot of people have a lot of role model. Like, for example, let me just use myself as an example. If I'm looking at somebody YouTube and I'm saying that this person is making $100 million just by putting makeup on their face, like, it's going to be hard for me to say that I want to be like, I'm sorry. You know what I'm saying? Like, I want to be an astronaut. I want to, but I think it's high time we start encouraging youth about STEM and how important it is in our community, especially in solving global problems. And this point that you just made actually resonate with me. Before we go further, and I know a lot of people have questions. I'm not sure if we have the admins. Do we have any question coming up from online? Or should I take the question from the audience? But before we go into the question part of things, I want to leave every one of us here with this point. Wherever you are, you can make a difference. Whatever you're even doing right now that it looks so insignificant, trust me, you're making difference in somebody's life. And like you rightly said, a lot of children out there, they are lost, they don't even have hope. And sometimes it just takes one person to change their story, to change their perspective about life and about things. And these are the things that it goes beyond the four corners of wall. Nobody's going to teach us this. And this is why it's very important. Anywhere we find ourselves, we should try at least as much as possible, share our knowledge, share our understanding about related subjects, especially in what we're talking about. If you have a book that can impact somebody, share it if you're done with it. All these little things that we take for granted, trust me, they are somebody else's prayer point. However, on this point, I'd like to take a few questions from the audience, Bryce sitting here, while we look at what we have online. So, anybody with question? Go ahead, sir.
This is my personal experience. I just want to ask, how do you think we can empower more girls in STEM education? Because from my experience in high school, most of the time in girls' school, high school, they are told, oh, STEM is difficult, mathematics is difficult, and suddenly they start dodging away from the STEM field, going to arts. So you find hundreds of thousands studying development study. Everybody cannot be a development specialist. we need girls in the STEM field. So how could we motivate or encourage girls and build the so-called minority difficulties of girls? And my second question is, you mentioned about the corporate social responsibility. Most times in my experience back home, companies usually often say, oh, we're gonna do this, we're gonna build the roads, we're gonna provide water, but eventually when they start operation, they do none of those things. So how could we commit them to action? Like example, signing MOU with local authorities, ministries to make sure that whatever they promise, they deliver. At least sponsor some school going students, water for the community, something else. But you cannot just be operating to your own benefit. Like we don't consider the CSR anymore, like useful to the community.
Thank you so much for your questions. I saw another hand, but before we go further, I'd like these two questions to be addressed first. So the second question is for you. I'll let you go ahead and address it.
Okay, so before I answer the second question, let me just address the first point you mentioned about.
You were answering the second
Okay,
question.
second question.
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. So I think again it boils down to leadership. Now, it's like I said earlier on, it's one thing to make a policy, then the other part is implementation. I have a legal background, and then in law we have the saying that justice should not only be seen to be done, but it should be manifestly seen to be done. Now, if you have an MOU with any local authority, with any big five corporations or multinational corporations, it's imperatively important that you hold them accountable, and that is where the government comes in. Most times, the collaborations and partnerships between the governments and these companies, you don't even know. That is why in theory it's one thing on paper, but in practice it's a different thing entirely. So I strongly think the way to go forward is to hold our leaders accountable. Because before any multinational comes into any locality, they will speak to the government first. And if the government holds them accountable, 5%, 2% derivative or whatever form, scholarships, they will work. And let's not fool ourselves out here. Sometimes these multinational companies, sometimes they gather money and they walk away free because they know the government have kickbacks or whatever they work with them. There are people that put them into the system. So the leadership vacuum has to be looked into. So that is what I think of that needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Okazo. So the second question, I'll give it to you because they're asking us question on how can we encourage more girls to take more STEM-related courses. Can you please answer that question?
Okay, so I think the most impactful way to do that is to show that someone like you is there making science. So I think it's really important to share the stories of women in science from Hypatia, from Alexandria, and to Andrea Ghez, who discovered a black hole in our galaxy. So it's important to share their stories because it's hard to find someone the most part of women in science that from the humanities story. So it's really important to share these stories with the girls from high school and also in college. So I think it's important to know that there are a lot of people like you there doing science and changing the world because women has always had a great impact in science and along all the history of humankind. So it's important to study the story and the history of women in science. So when we share the stories, we can empower other girls and women to do science too.
Thank you so much. So I'll bring the same question back to you. So how do you think we can encourage girls to take more STEM related courses?
Okay, so in my classroom, what I've been doing is I actually went out of my way and I was able to get more teachers inside the classroom outside of myself because I've noticed most of my students was interested in certain subjects such as math and science. I'm not specialized in that field. So what I did is I reached out to a few parents who are specialized in that field, and they've put the time in to come into the classroom and talk to those young girls about the importance of, as he was previously saying, when you ask most kids nowadays what they want to be, most of them say singers, model, NFL player, basketball player, No one to think to say, oh, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a scientist. So what I do is I implement those. I ask those parents to come into the classroom and talk to the young girls in my classroom, because I have a lot of amazing woman parents who are within those fields. That way, the young girls in my classroom can see that, that anything is possible. It's not about the gender, it's about what you aspire to be. Don't let the world make you think that because you're a woman, your goals are limited. We should encourage them to be the young women that they want to be.
Thank you. In addition to that, I would like to say that, well, in order for us to encourage more girls to, to have a role model like in STEM, I think there should be mentorship programs. That is why at Icon of Change, we have this amazing program that we call Women Lifting Women. Honestly, this program is basically what we have once in a year, where we bring women that are doing so well in different STEM related subjects to come and talk to girls that feel like they don't have hope. We make that environment very inclusive in such a way that, it's very basic for them that they could walk up to anybody and just tell them without no judgment, without. So I think there should be more of mentorship programs for our girls. There should be more of having implementation for STEM related subjects in every environment. It should be, fun. It should be something fun that's, any average girls or any average child out there can pick up interest in. I think that's another solution. I'm going to take one more question. Okay. Yes. We have 5 more minutes to round up.
Thank you very much for all the input. I'm Jimmy Sakala from Great Answer. I want to take a direction to apart from the government, because we've seen from our country, we have a policy wherein all the girls are given free scholarship as long as you go to STEM at university level. But my challenge is this: when you're opportune to get the STEM scholarship and then you're successful through university, now you say to come back and then you have a better paid job in the States, or a place other than Syria, which is a third world country. What should your advice be to those girls who are successfully going through the STEM challenge or STEM program and then to go back to Africa or where they're from to help? So that's one. Two, we have the cultural problem where society, secret societies, not just the bonus society, not to be in any way talking against them, because then they're going to be seeing my video, wherein they're championing the female mutilation of the genital organ. And that's a priority that for women in our country, that's a problem. We actually need the government to make a law to clamp on some of these. How do you change some of the narratives of some of these women within the societies, these surrounding and these localities, to understand that there is more for them to offer, especially that we saw the impact of the women in STEM during COVID. The ones that actually were frontliners, if they were not part of STEM, I'm telling you, we wouldn't have the kind of challenge and such a story we all celebrate today to see close to each other after COVID. So what mechanisms can you recommend on a global stage that can be used to enhance more participation to redress some of these emergencies? Because we know what next is coming. Now we've just completed COVID and 2 years of everybody staying away from each other. How can we have these women on preparedness to combat some of these global emergencies or local pandemics, and also ensure that our local and social and traditional things do not hold them down? Because some women, African women are traditional. They're Nigeria, you're traditional, you respect some of the customs as per law in your land. So if my chief or my kingdom is telling me you cannot be part of these kinds of things, how would you change that? How do you address that barrier? Thank you.
You're very welcome. So, because that's the last question, and we have 4 more minutes to go, I'll pass that question to Mr. Hector. What do you have to say about the question that you just asked us?
Well, it's complicated, right? Nothing worth addressing isn't, right? And me not being a woman makes it even more difficult to kind of address that. But I could speak to it, I think, in the way you're talking about it, more generally speaking, in the sense that, going back to what I said, is the purpose behind it. One of the things that we have to consider when we're instituting any change that happens, change doesn't have to happen entirely. All you need is one variable to change. As soon as one variable changes, the entire system changes. I, as a social worker, look at things from an ecological perspective. In other words, I'm looking at the various different levels and various different variables that are engaging with even a single person's life, right? A single woman's life, etc. So unless we engage the community, we address culture and cultural expectations and take that in the way we promote STEM. So create a connection between the educational value system, the importance of education, and how they align with the cultural values and responsibilities of people. They're more likely to stay engaged, right? Because it's something that's meaningful, and it's meaningful not just to me as an individual person, but it's meaningful to me as a person, a part of a community. That brings me back to my community. I have a good friend of mine who's a missionary in Alaska. And one of the biggest things he has, one of the biggest issues he has, is a small population of 300. They live with Yupik Eskimos. And he says that as soon as a child goes on to college, they never come back. So the education and the resources that they gain, they don't bring it back to the community, right? So how do we, as those who are educators, reach out, engage the entire system, right? Realizing at the same time that not all systems are going to be engageable, right? Some systems will be absolutely not, right? So what we do is we look for the system that's willing to change. And if one system or one variable changes, the system has to change. It has to change.
Thank you so much for that point. On this happy note, I'll just leave everyone listening to us, either you're here with us in the studio or you're watching online, to let you know that the narrative we're trying to change, or with the narrative we're trying to put out there, in order to involve more people, more girls, and more individuals in doing more related STEM courses, in order to have more equitable education and do more for their community, doesn't even stop with youth, or it doesn't stop. As a community leader, you have a role to play. As a government, where everybody have a role to play in this. And that brings me to answer that question, that how can we, engage more people at the grassroots level and connect back to all our girls that are doing STEM related courses to their roots. It still boils down to, what are you giving back to the society? What do you want people to remember about you? You have all this opportunity. Have you ever thought of your background, where you start from? Have you ever thought of you going back there to change the narrative? Because at the end of the day, it starts with you. Thank you so much. We were about to close the section. I really appreciate you for staying with us. Thank you. Bye, everyone.